The name Glenn Villeneuve is familiar to Life Below Zero fans. He is known for his daring adventures and strong bond with the Alaskan desert. Villeneuve stood out on the show because of his unique way of thinking about living off the grid and his survival skills. What happened to Glenn after he left the show though? Welcome back. Today we're going to find out the real reason Glenn Villeneuve quit Life Below Zero, and look at where his journey has taken him since then. His life began in Burlington, Vermont, on March 18, 1969, where he was born. Glenn formed a strong connection to nature early on because he grew up away from the noise and chaos of city life. Because his family lived in the woods, this area of nature became his playroom and school. From a very young age, Glenn's schooling was not like most kids. He didn't go to regular schools. Instead, his folks taught him at home. They taught him everything, from how to read and write to how to stay alive. Because Glenn lived in nature, he learned a lot about animals, plants, and the weather, which prepared him for a future in the woods. Glenn had a lot of fun and exciting adventures as a child. The peaks of Mansfield, Vermont, were his first mountains to climb. He was only 9 years old, but he had the skill and drive of someone much older. Most kids his age were still learning how to do things, but Glenn was already an expert at climbing. A trip Glenn took when he was 12 years old is one of the most interesting stories from his childhood. Glenn and his uncle set out on a long journey from Massachusetts to the border with Canada. Even though they didn't make it to the end of the trip, Glenn's desire to be bold grew. By age 13, he had persuaded his mother to let him go back and finish the trip by himself, which showed how determined and independent he was. Even though he finally got used to modern technologies like TV and the internet, stayed true to his wild roots. Growing up in the woods and learning how to hunt, fish, and make things by hand prepared him for a life that most people could only dream of. Glenn's early life events not only shaped his skills and knowledge, but they also made him love nature and adventure very much. He had a unique childhood that prepared him for what he would do later, including his famous part on Life Below Zero, where his amazing survival skills and deep link to nature wowed viewers all over the world. When Glenn Villeneuve decided to leave society and become a real Alaskan citizen, he started his journey to the show Life Below Zero. For some reason, he has always been interested in the wild and the rocky outback. He decided to accept the wild by moving to Alaska. He has been able to make his life very different. Finally caught the attention of the people who make the show Life Below Zero, where Glenn made his debut in 2013. Glenn has been an important part of the show ever since he joined the group. Because of how detailed his segments were, he added a realistic touch to survival. While other cast members talked about how to live each day in these harsh situations in different ways, Glenn had a different take on keeping alive. It was like a life to him, a steady flow of water instead of a series of challenges that you have to face and get through quickly. This point of view was well accepted by the public, and he gained a loyal following. During his time on the show, Glenn was a part of many amazing events that showed he could survive in the wild and get along with nature. Another time was when he went looking for caribou by himself and was able to get into the animal's cave, cross the difficult ice, and show that he was very good at tracking and hunting. This episode not only showed how skilled he was, but also how sensitive he was, and how much he loved the land. The choice that made a difference was when Glenn was attacked by a pack of wolves near his house. Instead of losing it and acting crazy, he stayed calm and collected his thoughts while also acting to protect himself within the boundaries of his area. It showed that he was a brave man who could make important choices in a dangerous situation where many people could die. Some people may have liked the show because he showed that he wasn't just a man who knew a lot about the outdoors. He could also use his skills when his life was in danger. The main idea of the season was that people are always fighting nature, but Glenn's life in the wild was the exact opposite of that. For Glenn, survival wasn't about making it through the pain or the survival itself. It was about getting along with nature, spirits, and the supernatural. He was, for example, telling people about the ideas behind living a long and healthy life, how to find food by scavenging, how to build homes that will last, and how animals worked. People watching his parts got a deep look into a life that was in tune with the earth and produced in a way that met people's needs. People loved seeing him get better with each show, and they liked how realistic he was and how he solved problems in a methodical way. A lot of people admire Glenn's ability to do well on the show Life Below Zero as the friendly savage. He captivated people by turning the forest into a romantic, fearless place where anyone could live. We felt that everyone should be able to experience life there. People quickly became aware of Glenn Villeneuve on Life Below Zero because he had a lot to say and a unique view on life compared to the other people on the show. Beginning with his first episode in Season 3 and ending with his last episode in Season 10, Glenn's segments were different from anything else viewers saw because they combined realistic survival knowledge with his own unique philosophical views on how to survive in the wild. Because Glenn could stay alive in the wild, he became very famous with his fans. During his parts, he could talk about how he learned how to live off the land and the secrets of the wild. In contrast to those who painted a grim picture of the harsh realities and difficulties of daily life in the wilderness, saw surviving as an ongoing process that made things more exciting. His goal wasn't just to stay alive, he also had a deep respect for the woods' challenges and simple pleasures. Glenn did a lot of things on the show that made him popular and showed how knowledgeable and methodical he was with most things. One of them was when Glenn went looking for a caribou by himself. After following the animal through a rough landscape, the hunter was able to show what methods he uses in endurance. Instead of just being a hunt, this show helped us understand Glenn and his love of the land and animals in general. It showed that he could live alone in the wilderness and take care of himself while also showing the greatest respect for nature. When Glenn was cutting wood near his house and almost got killed by a pack of wolves, that was another scary scene. He didn't freak out. Instead, he stayed calm and took steps to protect his life. Glenn successfully scared the wolves away with his rifle and a lot of confidence. It took a lot of skill and courage to do what he did. The episode kept people interested and turned him into a real woodsman. Glenn Villeneuve has been in a lot of fights and controversies on Life Below Zero, and most of them have been about the show's directors and production team. Glenn was well liked and made a big contribution to the show, but he and the other actors often disagreed on how to make things better, and Glenn liked to work on his own projects. From the beginning of the show, viewers could tell that Glenn had different plans for his parts than the producers did. Glenn's main goal was to show how real the lives of people who live in the wild are, showing that life doesn't have to be a constant battle, but can be beautiful and exciting. This went against everything the producers wanted to do, which was to focus on everyday struggles and shocking events that they thought would interest people. Even though Glenn wanted to tell stories about adventure and living in peace with nature, the producers chose the more basic theme of surviving against all odds. This basic difference in how to lead creative work was still one of the main things they fought over. Glenn often had disagreements with the stage crew, sometimes over how creative the show was, and sometimes over other things. He was sometimes disobedient and stubborn, which didn't work well with the strict rules and order needed to make TV. These things didn't happen very often, but one of the most memorable ones did happen during a winter shoot. Glenn chose to go into the wild by himself. He has always been known as a daring and hasty person who doesn't ask anyone else first. The production plan was thrown off by this last-minute decision, and the production team was doing crazy things to figure out how to keep him safe. The crew was having a hard time getting the shots they needed, even though Glenn's actions showed that he was a real person who wanted to see the world. Because he was so good at getting along with the actors he worked with, Glenn sometimes got into fights with other group members. The conditions were always tight because Alaska is a very harsh place to live, and sometimes one person was in charge of the group members' lives. That means that the different hunting grounds, ways they tried to stay alive, and ideas that guided their lives could bring them together. One thing that made Glenn strong was that he was independent, and had a clear way of handling chores. This could sometimes become a problem, which led to arguments about things that had to do with filming. This was on top of the fact that Glenn was very careless, and often broke the rules and did dangerous stunts. On set he was very hard to control. His carelessness and obvious disregard for safety steps made him look like the perfect daredevil. Glenn would sometimes disappear into the woods for days at a time, and no one would ever know he was there. Glenn's habit of putting himself in dangerous situations was another important problem. To stay alive, he had to take chances that other people might have avoided, which was both good and bad. It made for interesting TV, but it also made people worry more about his safety. In one famous episode, Glenn went after a hurt bear by himself, which was a dangerous task that could have gone horribly wrong. The production team was already on edge, because of the difficult shooting conditions, and it was getting harder and harder to handle the actors' unpredictable behavior. The relationship reached a breaking point because of creative differences. problems with the group and production team, and Glenn's rebellious nature that led him to break rules and try new things. The people who work on the show had to weigh the pros and cons of keeping Glenn as a character. Glenn quit Life Below Zero in 2019 because of all of these building problems. It wasn't an easy choice, but it became clear that working with Glenn would be more difficult than helpful. He was a fan favorite, so his leaving the show left a hole, but it also let the production team focus on keeping everyone safe and working together, which was important for the show's success. It's clear that Glenn was brave and strong during his time on Life Below Zero. It also shows the problems that happen when artistic ideas and safety concerns meet in the harsh reality of wilderness survival. Glenn Villeneuve quit the TV show Life Below Zero in 2019. Fans were sad because they thought he was a free-spirited guy who liked living in the Alaskan wildlife. What the audience did was instant and even more striking. Glenn found out that he had a lot of friends who liked how he told the truth about his brave life and spirit. He had to leave, and many of his fans didn't understand for a moment. They were all let down. After Glenn's farewell speech, his friends showed their support for him on social media by posting messages and comments. They also talked about how upset they were that he was leaving the show. A lot of fans saw how much Glenn was going through and wrote that they wanted to see him back on TV. But the people who made the show got a range of responses. They liked Glenn's contribution and the things he brought to the show Life Below Zero, but they knew it was time to make the change. Being careful to keep the crew safe and the show running smoothly was very important. In comments, the show's producers thanked Glenn for being on the show and said that letting go was a hard choice. Over the years, Glenn was never afraid to tell his fans what was bothering him. He also used social media and public platforms to defend himself. Later, he wrote a very long status on Facebook in which he made it clear that the show's producers had no plans to let him be a part of the next seasons, which meant that his time on the show was over. Glenn said something about how the production team wasn't talking to each other and giving an answer. According to him, he was fired from the show without cause because he had worked hard on it for 6 years and 85 episodes. Glenn talked about the events that led to him leaving the show in more depth in his podcasts and conversations. He talked about the tension and growing disagreements between his desire to show what is real and the producer's desire to show drama. Also replied to the safety concerns, saying that this was one of the things that worried people about his risk-taking personality, but it was important in his book of survival. Still, Glenn's choice to quit the job was a good one because it opened up new possibilities for him. He kept up with his social media accounts, which kept him in touch with his fans and let him share more content from his trip into the woods. His departure from Life Below Zero marked the end of an age but also the start of a new adventure-filled chapter in his life, showing that Glenn Villeneuve's strength and spirit go far beyond reality TV. Glenn Villeneuve has continued to live a full and exciting life since leaving Life Below Zero. He has taken on a variety of activities, in real estate and the stock market more and more. Glenn's ability to make smart decisions has helped him get rich, which lets him follow his interests without worrying about money. Glenn's love for the outdoors hasn't changed since he stopped working on TV. He often goes into the backcountry of Alaska to improve his survival skills and find new places to explore. He stays connected to the rough landscapes he loves through his many travels. He also talks about these things with his friends a lot on social media and in podcasts. What Glenn Villeneuve did after Life Below Zero shows how strong and flexible he is. Glenn continues to live a life marked by strength, freedom, and a deep respect for nature, whether he is taking care of his investments, spending time with his family, or navigating the wilds of Alaska. Many people are moved by his story to realize how simple and beautiful it is to live in harmony with nature.